Hi, everybody. Good evening. It's March the 29th today. I'm coming at you Sunday night, and hope everybody's okay. Again, it's been a couple weeks since the world kind of went crazy, and as you can see, I'm in a bit of a different location this evening. I've set up a formal office space, I guess, in my house. Before I was just at my kitchen table, but things have changed, of course, and I think I'm in a bit longer than I thought I was going to be, much like a lot of you, I'm sure. A couple things I wanted to go over just getting into week five. The first thing is that Monday, so tomorrow, everyone will have their week four discussion questions feedback to you. And then throughout the week, I'll be sending the papers back to you. So my guess is that by probably around Thursday, I'll have the last of the papers done from your week four auditing your leadership assignment. So you'll definitely have those before the end of the week, and you'll receive that feedback as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about week five and what's going on in week five. So week five is all about trust. As you may know from the course readings, much like previous weeks, for each of the four readings this week, I did drop a couple notes into the course news and bulletin section if you want to take a look at that. If they're of any help to you, of course, I read, I highlight, and perhaps some of the things that I've focused on within each of the articles, and of course the chapter 4 from Leslie may be of assistance to you. What I wanted to do to start was to go over, and of course I'm looking at my Surface Pro on the side here. Our two big course objectives for this week: examine issues of trust and transparency in stakeholder relationships, and reflect on the potential barriers to developing trustworthy relationships with stakeholders. And as you know from all of the articles in the chapter from Leslie, one big barrier is power imbalances within organizations and some of the stakeholders that are associated with organizations. So as you think about the questions this week and think about how you are going to address those barriers around differences in power, differences in hierarchy, and all those things that come to play with organizational trust, which of course is a huge piece of stakeholder engagement. If your stakeholders do not have trust, the likelihood of them engaging meaningfully with you diminishes substantially, of course. So from the readings, of course, Leslie took it from a school perspective in terms of her chapter, and Peterson, Combs, Harris, and also looked at it from a school perspective and the idea of building trust within school communities. The other two articles, both Greenwood and Van Buren III, and Pearson, Martin, and Padmere, looked at it more from a corporate perspective and what building trust would look like in organizations. So we have two readings that are very much focused on a school perspective and two that are focused more on a corporate perspective, I think all of which inform our ideas of what it means to build trust within an organization and therefore positively impact stakeholder engagement along with that. So again, I want to bring you back to how do we acknowledge the power differentials that are there and deal with those in a way that encourage others to engage with us in our organizations. Just as an FYI, once you're done this degree, I highly recommend, when you have a bit of time, purchase the book The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. It's a great book. I've read it. I use quotes from it all the time, and it's very much aligned, in line with what we're talking about this week. So, of course, the discussion questions this week. The first one, outline the series of steps you would take to ensure your organization will be seen as trustworthy to all stakeholders. Be sure to reference the unit's resources in your response. So you could certainly look at any one of the four readings and think about how that particular reading, brought together some ideas for you on ways to seem trustworthy to organizations. And I think it was perhaps the Greenwood and Van Buren the third article where they talked about stakeholders come into this process basically having to trust and having sometimes no recourse if the organization does not act in that way. So there's a vulnerability, and the word vulnerability comes up again and again in that article. How do we acknowledge the vulnerability and how do we respect it, and how do we, through how we acknowledge that vulnerability, build trust, right? I want you to think about that a lot. And I'm sure you've had a lot of examples of that in your organization and also as a stakeholder, perhaps, in other organizations, and basically as a citizen as well, right? The second DQ, again, looks at things like it says many issues will need to be addressed and managed as they may tend to engender lack of trust, including inequity of the relationship, differential power of individual or groups in the engagement process, language and cultural barriers in ways of working. So, of course, Leslie in Chapter 4 talks a lot about how some cultural groups organizations don't pay as much trust to some groups as others, and think about what you read through in that chapter around that. How will you specifically address these issues in your work environment? So I'd like you to rely on the course readings, all of which talk about this topic to some extent. This week, all 4 of them. But in addition, think about your own experiences as a stakeholder and how you felt times where you've really trusted an organization you've either worked with as an employee or engaged with as a stakeholder, and times where you haven't. So I'm sure you're going to have some personal examples. Mix those with the course readings for this week. I hope you have a great week, everyone. Please take care of yourselves and your loved ones. I know it's a weird time. So I wish you all the best. And if you have any questions, of course, reach out anytime.